Next up, we have Kurt Opsahl, who is the Deputy Executive Director and General Counsel of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the work of the EFF in fighting for the rights of people in a digital age. In addition to representing clients on civil liberties, free speech, and on privacy law, Kurt counsels the EFF projects and initiatives. He is the lead attorney on the Coders' Rights Project and has represented several companies who have challenged national security letters. Before he joined the EFF, Kurt worked as an attorney with the law firm Perkins Coie, where he represented technology clients with respect to intellectual property, privacy, defamation, and other online liability matters. For his work in helping companies and individuals respond to government subpoenas, he has been called a rabid dog by the Department of Justice. So I'd like to all to join me in giving a very warm welcome to our own rabid dog here in the privacy ecosystem, Kurt Opsahl. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you. Thank you. And great to be here. Thanks, everybody. It's my pleasure to join you today and talk a little bit about civil liberties with privacy-enhancing technologies. I'm from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, founded in 1990. EFF has been working to make sort of a better world defending civil liberties, free speech, privacy, innovation rights. We do litigation with the lawyers. I'm one of the lawyers there. We also do policy work. We do grassroots activism, trying to get people to participate and help the cause by contacting their legislatures. We'll talk a little bit more about that kind of thing later. And we create our own freedom-enhancing technologies. So the topic I want to talk about is the why behind putting together privacy-enhancing technologies. Privacy is a human right. And it's important, it makes other rights possible. So privacy is necessary in order to have some personal autonomy, and it's necessary to enable freedom of expression, both to be able to speak, but also, very importantly, able to learn and read so that you can have opinions to share through your freedom of expression. And one of the themes here is code is not enough. So it is a part of it. It's multiple parts. You have law and policy. Sometimes those fail. You have a technology as a backstop. But in order to make that technology, you also need to have the law and the policy. So putting these things together is what makes a stronger world and allows us to build the future that we would want to live in. So why is it especially important now? Because we live in a golden age of surveillance. Records are being kept these days to an extent never dreamed of before. And if you read a lot of science fiction, dystopian science fiction, they did a lot of dreaming of how things could go. And we're sort of combining those things. We're seeing more and more things being tracked in a way that records were never kept of before. And this also means that your de facto privacy is increasingly lost. De facto privacy is sort of you walk down the street, 100 people see you walking down the street, none of them remembers who you are or could pick you out in a lineup a month later. But if where your walk is being tracked, if a camera is facing with facial recognition, that kind of privacy you could have in public spaces just because people wouldn't remember is gone. A lot of things were also records were kept, but they were in paper form in a file cabinet, down the basement behind a tiger, and no one would find them. But now all those records are available and can be searched by machine learning. So we end up losing a lot of privacy that we used to have as technology grows. And we have a lot of surveillance, both commercial and government. And most of the surveillance that you're going to undertake on a day-to-day basis is commercial, tracking cookies, websites logging as you go through. But these things get combined because that information from the commercial sites goes to a data broker. Data broker makes those data available to the government. So instead of having to get a warrant, having to use legal process, they just buy the information from a data broker. So let's explore a little bit, what is privacy? And I'm sure you all have some notion you're working on a privacy protective technology, but it's worth sort of thinking about, like, what are there? Many definitions of what privacy is. One of my favorites comes from Justice Brandeis. This is almost 100 years old, but it's the right to be left alone. And this is a focus on the autonomy of a person. It's basically some things are not somebody else's business. And it doesn't depend on whether this is something which you need to hide or such, but rather it's not their business. They shouldn't get into it. You get to be left alone. Another definition is the control over your flow of information. So you can have selective disclosure. If you give your information to somebody, who can they share it with? Is it to anyone they want, or is it limited? Access controls. Who can see it, who cannot see it, so that the people you want to share it with get to see it, but you have some control that that is not unlimited. You know where it's going to go. And this is a focus on choice and consent. And this is actually on the t-shirt here. Consent is very important. But the thing about, dark patterns work against this. If you go on to various websites, they will often have a pop-up that asks for your consent on various things. Some make it easy to say, don't track me. Some make it very hard. And dark patterns can make it so that consent is hard to have. That's why you have to have a technological backstop. Another important aspect of privacy is its insurance against a future, a dystopian future. One is that something lawful today, something that's socially acceptable, culturally acceptable today, may not be in the future. And the records of your participation in that may still persist because data, cheap and easy to store, and you can have the machines from the future go through that data to find people who had done something which was previously okay, but isn't okay anymore. And once some information is in the public, once information is available, it's very hard to claw that information back. So by having privacy now, you have some insurance against this dystopian future. Now, probably none of you are saying this, but you've probably heard it around. You have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. And this is often used in a bad faith or disingenuous way where someone's trying to say, it doesn't matter, only criminals, only really bad people want to have privacy. And you all know that's not true. Well, one is that everybody has something that they don't want to share. It doesn't need to be anything particularly bad. Maybe they just don't want to share it. It's a personal thing to them. But also, if you're faced with this argument, you're talking to people about it, you should note that even if somebody is transparent, they want to get it all out there, they don't care about their own privacy, privacy still is important for them because it helps the others that we rely on. Journalists having privacy to talk to their sources. Dissent in an authoritarian regime where you want to enable people to be able to push back against that and create a better society for themselves. And also, the privacy of others allows new ideas, new cultural or social stances to come into the fore. Give them the space to make that, and we all benefit from those additional options, additional choices. So it protects the ability to share, form these political and social ideas. So we can cover sending and everything, supporting or opposing causes, because someone looking over your shoulder can be very intimidating. This is sort of the notion of the panopticon that people will behave more like the authority wants them to behave if they think that they're watched at all times. But it is critical to allow space for unpopular opinions to have that privacy. And bringing it into financial transactions, these have some deeply personal issues, personal data. So membership in organizations, you often will pay for membership. You could have EFF, the NAACP, ACU, NRA. They're the organizations that your membership says something about what your beliefs are, what your politics are, and that would be revealed by your transactions. Books you buy, subscriptions to magazines, subscriptions to newsletters, services. Of course, medical expenses. And in some places, we have disfavored medical care. There are places, medical care that is lawful in one place, unlawful in another. In addition, your shopping history. And, there could be a whole bunch of things in there that will reveal something about you. Maybe it's not that bad, but it could be, revealing you bought a wedding ring, you bought a wedding dress. Tells you something about what's going on in your life and creates that transaction. You pay for some funeral expenses. You may have suffered a tragedy in your life. These are the sort of things that can be deeply personal and are revealed by access to all of your transactions. Now, another aspect of this is anonymity, where the transaction itself may have to have some records associated with it or what you're doing, but doing it in a manner that is anonymous or pseudonymous. I think the Supreme Court said it very well, explaining what the value of it is. Anonymity is a shield from the tyranny of the majority. It exemplifies the purpose of the First Amendment to protect unpopular opinions at the hand of an intolerant society. And this was well grounded in the U.S. Constitution. The founders relied on anonymity and pseudonymity, using Publius or other names that did not tie to their actual identity in some of the founding documents, the Federalist Papers, upon which our Constitution was based. Now, another aspect, this came in the 50s during the Civil Rights era in the South, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People versus Alabama, where the Supreme Court, that compelled disclosure of an affiliation with groups engaged in advocacy can be a restraint against the freedom of association. That's another First Amendment right. It's not explicit in it, but it's part of the freedom of assembly and the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. And what they found is that when Alabama wanted to see who all the people were who joined NAACP, that would be intimidating. That would intimidate people from joining that group that was trying to advance civil rights in the 50s in Alabama. Also from the 50s, United States versus Rumley, is that demanding of a publisher the names of the purchasers of the publication. Without that, or with that, the freedom of press as we know it disappears. And he illustrates, as we talked about, the specter of a government agent looking over every reader's shoulders. More recently, tattered cover, this is actually a Colorado Supreme Court case, not a US Supreme Court case, but it hit the issue very well because it was a search warrant for bookstore records, reflecting what the customers purchased, and the court recognized that there was a First Amendment right to read anonymously because the receipt of that information helps people form the ideas and opinions that are essential, that makes it so you can have an opinion to express. Now, let's turn to the broader civil rights context here. A couple of things we'll go over. Financial censorship can be addressed with some decentralized, moving away from centralized choke points. Code is speech. It's an important aspect for the right to be able to make the code that pushes back on this. And due process, the way that we can balance some of the issues of expression, of privacy, of Fourth Amendment, First Amendment rights, with a process that helps ensure that those rights get protected. So financial censorship has been something EFF has been working on for quite some time, and it is a challenging thing. Their decentralized options can help avoid it because we have a lot of centralized options, and there have been more before, and they are able to shut down accounts or inhibit transactions that has serious ramifications on free expression, on the ability to do this, both for the people trying to obtain the information, purchase that, and the online services that need to have financial institutions in order to get the money, pay their bills. So one of the earlier examples that we got involved in was WikiLeaks. So in 2010, they had a number of major leaks related to the Iraq War. And there was a lot of pressure on WikiLeaks. Some various representatives, some senators in particular, were pushing for a penalty against them to stop them getting financed. And the thing is, if they had passed that into a law, that law would have been unconstitutional. But they just did it through pressure, and under that pressure, PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, and Bank of America all cut off services to WikiLeaks so WikiLeaks couldn't get donations. So at that time, Bitcoin was starting to come into some prominence. It was early in the days, but it made a way to get around that financial censorship and continue to have funding to WikiLeaks. We've had a number of other examples that come through. I'll go through a few of them. PayPal cut off several online publishers and retailers, Bookstand, Smashwords, and Accessiga. Their accounts were going to be closed. The sites published legal but controversial erotic material. So we joined with a number of other civil liberties organizations, and we called on PayPal to change its policies, which was successful. PayPal said it would focus on the ebooks that contain illegal images, CSAM, child sexual abuse materials, are illegal in the US law, but not on text-only descriptions. And they would no longer demand publishers remove all books in a particular category. It had to be sort of a book-by-book demand. So, and it gave the site a way to respond and challenge. Nevertheless, it was still being able to do this and cut off things and potentially cut off things which are legal. Another example, Nifty Archive and Stripe. Stripe suspended the account, and again, the material was constitutionally protected speech under the First Amendment. It was something that you couldn't have a law to say this couldn't be available, but by cutting off financial support, it made it difficult to make it available, made it unprofitable to make it available, and caused a lot of harm to this Nifty archive. So we got involved in there, some good discussions. Stripe reinstated Nifty and said they would do a better job. Nevertheless, it persists to this day. So if the internet is going to be a global forum for expression, it's going to be a place where people can have ideas, be all the lawful speech available, we have to have payment services and communication that allows for that. And this goes beyond pure speech issues. So transactions can be lawful in some jurisdictions, but not in others. An example that's coming to prominence these days, after the Dobbs decision on abortion, several states are working to criminalize online purchase of Medicaid abortion pills. There are also some laws to make it illegal to provide information about those things, how to get them. And so it'll be lawful in one place and illegal in another. And this is going to put some pressure on centralized financial services to enable these things. Now, we also have had, coming after Dobbs, a new political recognition of some of the values of data privacy that legislators who previously were on the side of law enforcement access, pushing hard for that, are now seeing this as an example of where law enforcement access to enforce a state law that is against their political ideas. Well, maybe that we do need some data privacy there. So it may give an opportunity, at least, to bring these issues more clearly forward. Visa and MasterCard have a duopoly that remains a major choke point. And we haven't given Visa and MasterCard the authority to decide what speech should be acceptable and what is not. You know, the companies have not been elected by anybody, but because of their place in the ecosystem where most people doing online transactions are still doing it via credit card, we've paid the choke point that we'll be enforcing speech rules. All right, so let's talk another speech issue. Code is speech. So cryptocurrencies, the blockchain in general, the ecosystem that you're creating around cryptocurrencies, they're expressed in code. And code can express a political or social idea, for example, a commitment to privacy, a commitment to anonymity, and the idea that people should be able to have private conversations, private transactions. And this came up in the 1990s. It was one of the key victories in the first crypto wars. You might say we're still in the crypto wars, but in the 1990s, there was an effort to restrict the discussion of encryption through export regulations, that only weak encryption could be made available on the internet because it could be downloaded outside of the US. And at the time, there was a thing like some browsers with having SSL encryption, and there was a domestic version and an export version. The export version was limited to 40 bits, 40-bit keys, which would make it easy for the NSA to crack. And it was kind of ludicrous because it was pretty easy to nevertheless get the domestic version overseas, but there were these rules in place. And so the initial context was a program called Snuffle, an open source encryption program that Dan Bernstein published online that would be available. And this came into a case, Bernstein versus the United States. And the judge said it very well here by looking at what makes it is that computer languages are just another form of language. Like German, like French, like music and math. They're a language that communicates information either to a computer or to those who read it, and that, able to consider that the source code is a form of speech. A few years later, this came up before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeal. This is the second level in the U.S. system. You have district courts, courts of appeal, the Supreme Court. And that court found that a medium of expression having a functional capacity doesn't mean that it is not protected as speech. In that case, the court looked at the musical score as an example, but that's another way where there is encoding of information on a score that can be used to make music, but is also a form of expression. And that case was about Professor Younger, who taught computer law, and because of expert control restrictions, was unable to have non-US citizens into his class. So why is this valuable? This means that the government must meet higher standards to restrict speech. So you have, for content-based speech, where the law discriminates against certain ideas or the substance of what it communicates, what you're trying to do with it, it must pass strict scrutiny. Strict scrutiny is very hard for a law to pass. This makes strong limitations on what the government can do, can restrict certain kinds of code based on what it's trying to do, what kind of expression it has. Content-neutral speech laws or regulations have a lower level of scrutiny, but they still have to pass scrutiny. They still have to be showing that they are not over-limiting speech. And what this means is it's harder for laws to say what you can and cannot code. And this may become useful as people put forward a code that has ideas embedded in it, privacy-enhancing ideas, that some aspects of government would want to try to push back on and not have that to be available. And we can turn to due process. And due process is itself a right, but it's the right that protects other rights. So the government has to provide a process that allows for the protection of our fundamental rights. And we'll be talking about the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment provides standards for searches and seizures. The First Amendment provides standards for masking anonymous speech, invading into personal information that you might be using for getting your expressions or to enable your expressions. So privacy can be embedded into this, and the freedom of association under the First Amendment, and the ability of the government to obtain information involuntarily, has to be provided involuntarily. Now, I'm talking about what's in the United States, but I note that outside the US, international human rights law protects similar rights to privacy, to expression, your mileage may vary from one jurisdiction to another, but in a jurisdiction that respects human rights law, that has the rule of law and a democratic process, these arguments can still be used, and why it still is extraordinarily important. So in the US, we have a very challenging doctrine to privacy, the Third Party Doctrine. The idea of the Third Party Doctrine is that giving your information to a third party is, say, well, you've lost your expectation of privacy about that information. You've disclosed it to somebody else. And this came around in the 70s. One of the cases, U.S. v. Miller, was about the privacy of bank records. It looked to the Bank Secrecy Act, which required financial records to be maintained, and said, well, you knew about this, we gave it over to this third party and didn't have a privacy interest. There was another case around the same time, Smith v. Maryland, that was dealing with the information given to a phone company. In that case, it was about a phone call trying to determine who had made that call. Say, well, you've given it over to a third party. You don't have the expectation of privacy in that, and so a warrant is not required. And one of the challenges of the reasonable expectation of privacy system that have occurred over the next 40, 50 years is that less and less things are private. You're using third parties all the time. Consider email. Email, when it was first becoming used in like the 80s and 90s, was often something where it would exist temporarily on a server, be downloaded onto your computer, and then if somebody wanted to get it, they would have to go to you with a warrant to get it from you. But of course, now people are using Gmail, and they're using web-based services, cloud-based services. There's third parties involved all of the time. Involuntarily or voluntarily, you're constantly interacting with third parties. So this doctrine has become less protective. I mean, it was never really protective, but more of a danger because so many people are always using these third parties. So a couple years back, 2018, the Supreme Court put a limit on the third party doctrine. That was a case where it was looking at cell phone records for location. And the government's argument was, well, you're walking down the street, people can see you, you have no expectation of privacy in a public space, and not only that, you are giving this information as being held by the phone company who needs to have the cell location in order to process the phone calls. You should have no expectation of privacy, no warrant is required. Court said no, a warrant is required. And the court recognized that these records were a record of everything that you were doing, everywhere you were going. And in order to, with that record, you could have a window into somebody's life, particular movements, but from those movements, you can see like who are they visiting, where are they staying at night, are they going to an office regularly, are they going to a political rally, have they met up with someone in a bar and then gone home together. All these things can be revealed from location data, and it was an incredibly pervasive understanding of your entire life, and that we needed to have a warrant to protect that information, even though, yes, it was stored with a third party. Now, more recently, this came up in the cryptocurrency world in a Fifth Circuit case, US versus Grotowski, and unfortunately, they came to a different conclusion. In that case, they used a subpoena to get the identities of anyone who sent Bitcoin to a particular website's Bitcoin address, and the court held that they didn't need a warrant to get this, and they relied upon the third party doctrine. And here's what the court said about it. It was looking at how Bitcoin has a public ledger, that people can see what addresses are part of the transfer, and thus you could see the address at least, and Grotowski lacked any privacy interest in this information. Now, this is one of the challenges that has been around with Bitcoin. The initial paper, Satoshi said that it would be anonymous. This didn't turn out to be quite as true as he had expected. But it also means that they're going with it with a lower standard. So EFF disagrees with this. We think that Carpenter should have been read more broadly, and we want to push back on the third-party doctrine and recognize that when something is going after an intimate aspect of your life, trying to figure out what you're running in, that the police, the law enforcement, needs to meet a warrant standard and can't just get it with a read. Now, this is just like they could have gotten it with a warrant. From the understanding of the case, they had a basis. They could have gone to a magistrate and say, okay, we're going to get this warrant. But they didn't want to go through that extra process. And that process is what protects our rights, so that a magistrate has to look at it, a neutral and detached magistrate, determining that there is probable cause to believe that their evidence of a crime is there. And that is a good restriction. And one of the reasons it's a very important restriction is if you have that higher standard, it has to be targeted. And if you have the lower standard, this enables more dragnet. If you don't have to meet a standard, you can get a lot of suspicionless searches of information, trying to get the, where you don't have a particular reason, you're fishing through it, and that is more of the surveillance society that we don't want. If they have to go through and meet that standard, we can help preserve our rights. All right, so this is it. As we're talking about this here, what else can people do? Let's talk a bit about how you, as members of the Zcash community, what can you do to help protect these rights? And there's a couple of ways. We're talking about political activism, so you guys get informed and get your voice heard, be part of the conversation. And technological activism is that code might not be enough, but code is part of it, and understanding that code, so speaking tech to power, explaining technologies, and also code for your values. So getting informed seems straightforward. Just follow the news, look at what's going on, look on legal developments in particular, legislation, what's out there. You can look to some blockchain associations and Zcash Foundation, other sources to find out what is going on. Industry organizations, activist groups like EFF, Fight for the Future, other people. Look at this and try and find things or you can do that you can make a difference. So talk a little bit how to get your voice heard. So legislatures, they want to hear from constituents, but they will only listen to people who participate, who speak to them. Elected officials want to know whether their policies are helping or hurting their communities. And they also want to know whether there is grassroots support for policies and proposals. Is this going to resonate well with their constituent communities? And we talk a lot about legislatures, but also the executive branch has opportunities where you can have your voice heard. They'll ask for a request for comments on a proposed rule or regulation, and many of these are open to the public. Anyone who wants to provide a comment can put it in. Sometimes people organize around a set of comments and have people's voices heard on proposed regulations, and you can be part of that. Now, this is a global conference. It's a global thing. Activism is global, and there are a lot of ways you can do this around the world. If you have a democratic jurisdiction, you can use some of these same techniques to have your voice heard, talk to the legislature. Now, if you're in a jurisdiction that doesn't have a strong democratic tradition, doesn't really have the rule of law, it is going to be harder. There will be other ways to get your voice heard, but they may have some risks. But getting your voice heard in more public spaces as opposed to putting it out directly to the legislatures. We'll put an example here. There's a lot of federal legislation that has been proposed for cryptocurrencies. And how can you do it? Well, first step would be find your representatives. You can Democracy.io has a system where you put in some information about yourself and it feeds you back who your representatives are. Sometimes it's hard to keep that sort of thing up to date, so you can also go direct to the source and go to the House or the Senate and find the contact information for your representatives, and then use that to reach out and talk to them. Now, how's it effective? Well, one thing is the effort you put in is something that they're looking for. The legislatures want to know that you care, and how you evidence that you care is putting effort into it. So an in-person visit, going to DC, setting up an appointment and going to the office, that is going to be a lot of effort and will resonate as a very strong passion on the topic. A phone call also is like the next level, shows a very strong thing. Custom email where you write it up and you explain why you want them to take a particular position and have it be unique to your circumstances and explaining it, that resonates more. And then at the lower end, the copy pasta email where they see lots of things that are coming with the same language in them. Now, this may be still some form of effective advocacy. You get a lot of people who will copy and paste a thing in and send an email, but because it's relatively low effort, this will just go into a column of like, well, here's how many people are supporting that. So it has some effect, but is not as effective. And then there's indirect activism, and that is talking in the public space, putting it out in your tweets, putting it out in blog posts, getting a public conversation. And where that's going to get legislators' attention is when you have media coverage, where a message goes viral, gets a lot of views, gets a lot of attention, and becomes part of an online conversation. If you're talking to a legislature, you should keep it simple and clear what you're going to say. So one thing is who you are. And even though we're talking about privacy, we just talked about the value of anonymity, nevertheless, giving your name and your location is going to make it more effective. One of the things they want to know is, are you a constituent? Are you somebody who might be voting for me in the next election? Are you part of the people who it's my responsibility to represent? And then clearly state the problem, what it is that brought you here, what your position is on this, what you want them to do. So, and might be pass this bill, sign this letter, sponsor a bill, adding your name to it, don't pass this bill, make this amendment, but say specifically what you're asking for, and that's it. Just be clear, allow them to understand where you're coming from, why it's important, and what you want them to do about it. Now let's turn a little bit to technological activism. So we have talk a bit about speaking tech to power, how to use your power responsibility, how to keep things secret and safe, and how to fight for the users. So speaking tech to power, technologists can really help legislatures, executive branch people who often are very unfamiliar with the technology, who in many cases, especially in the US legislature, a lot of the representatives grew up in a different era where computers and technology were less prominent and don't have a strong understanding. They might have some staffers who do, but these are complex systems. So a way in which technologists can add value to the conversation is in clear and simple terms, explain how new technologies work. And good reason to do this. You might have some principal disagreement. The legislature of representative may not agree on all of your policy positions and values, but note that just simply misunderstanding how the technology works has, in many cases, ended up with bad policy that could have been avoided even if there hadn't been a philosophical distance. So this is helping them help you. Now, as Uncle Ben once said to Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So you have some power. As technologists, you're building out a system, building out the ecosystem that you want to get people to use, want to get people to get protected by, and so express those values through your code. Use your speech embodied in code to express those values, asking yourself as you're writing something, will this help protect and preserve civil liberties? And one of the values that we're trying to get here is decentralized systems, to move away from choke points and have a place where people can make choices about what systems they use. So look out for things that will re-centralize what's been tried to be decentralized and avoid those single points of failure. Keep it secret, keep it safe. So if you want people to be able to use these systems, they have to have confidence that it will do, that their information that they want to have secret will remain secret, that it will be safe from involuntary disclosure, whether that comes from a data leak, metadata. So as building things, you protect the primary area, like the content of a communication, the substance of it, but there'll be metadata around it. So look for what metadata would be revealed as you're programming things, whether that will be available. And then do some penetration testings, red teaming, to make sure that these things can be secure. So many people have noted, cryptocurrencies have a built-in bug bounty. And we've seen many examples. Just looking recently in the news, there were a number of flaws related to some cryptocurrency wallets in which many, many millions of dollars were transferred. And this sort of thing makes you feel that it's not safe. So building things that are secure, that are tested, that when they go out to the public, will give the confidence that they are going to work as intended and had a strong security review. This will help people feel comfortable using these technologies and getting the privacy and security benefits from those technologies. Fight for the users. Usability is key. So if people can't use a system, they're not going to get the benefit from it. And the average user needs to be able to use it. A lot of people are not very comfortable with technology. They may make mistakes. Like, For a lot of encryption systems, for encryption in the communication context, you have very strong encryption, and where there are problems is because they're not very usable, and then it's easy for people to make mistakes when it's not usable because they don't understand how to protect themselves. There may be settings that are available that can provide greater degrees of privacy, but people don't realize that or don't use them or use them incorrectly or have a misunderstanding. So making something that is very usable is critical. And think of not just for the user who is purchasing or to making the transaction, but also for the other side of it, like an online merchant who wants to allow for someone to privately or anonymously to purchase expressive materials, either like buying some books, joining a membership of an NGO. Has to be easy for people who are not technologically sophisticated to be able to implement those systems in a safe manner. Also, work with marginalized groups to ensure that all users can benefit from the technology. There are a lot of groups that will have trouble using new technologies because they are built for sophisticated systems and they have a less sophisticated smartphone or even a feature phone or a limited access to computers, that making it so that systems are as easy as possible to use from people all over and allow them to take the benefits of this technology. So together, we can make this better for you. You can help chart the course to a future that protects privacy, allows for freedom of expression, keeps our civil liberties intact. But it's not going to be easy. I'm an optimist for the future, and I think you all should be optimists that we can get to a better future, but it's not going to be without working for it. So we have to make this future and put in the effort to do that. So one of the ways you can do this is to join EFF. We do accept Zcash, so you can become a member. You can also join other organizations and find out ways to do this and implement a better tomorrow. All right, with that, I will take some of your questions.
Thanks, Kurt. So we've got some questions coming through from the Discord, and just a reminder that if you want to ask questions of our presenters, please post them in the Discord. And the first one is, you talked about how technology can be used to protect our privacy. Which new privacy technology will have the biggest impact on our daily lives?
What new privacy technology will have the biggest impact? Well, I think a lot of it's actually well implementing older technologies like encryption, but creating a more usable system for it. Also making more prominent technologies like the Tor browser, for example, does a great job of that, but making that more available to other people. So I think a lot of it is taking some of these classical ideas and making them more widely available or more usable. So the technology, I guess I'm saying the new technology would be the implementation, when you take these core ideas and implement them well so that anybody can come along with limited technical knowledge, take advantage of it, and have a conversation, have a transaction, do something in a privacy protective manner.
Next question. Malicious speech can cause significant harm, like the classic example of screaming fire in a crowded theater.
Oh boy.
Can we protect against malicious speech without compromising on privacy and free speech principles?
All right, so first I gotta have so shouting fire in a crowded theater is often used as an example of speech that is not allowed. This is incorrect. So the phrase shouting fire in a crowded theater came from a case around World War I, which was about whether it was okay to publicly be against the draft, which you might say, of course you have a First Amendment right to oppose the draft. At the time, the court said that there wasn't that right. And then they gave this example. So that case no longer stands for the test by which speech is allowed or disallowed. And so I would say, put away that example. It is not currently where the law is on what speech is allowed or not allowed. So then you have the issue, what about things that are lawful but awful? Things that are speech that are permitted but are malicious or harmful. And I think where at least from the civil liberties standpoint on this, is also within the freedom of expression rights of a site or a venue to determine what speech is allowed on that platform and to remove speech that doesn't fit with their standards. And so you have content moderation. Content moderation is a very important issue these days. It comes up a lot. What EFF has looked at in that is making sure you have content moderation, that you have a process. You're clear about what content is allowed or not allowed. If content is removed, then give people an appeal mechanism to say that it was removed unfairly. Because, another problem that one has is that people weaponize content moderation systems, try to take down speech that is allowed, but they don't want to see there. And then have it be the sites that are determining it. And then finally, you get to situations in which there is, in fact, unlawful speech, and that it is the responsibility of the government to, if they want to investigate that and to go after people for illegal speech, to use the due process to make sure that when they're trying to get the information, to find out who it is, to breach through the barriers of privacy, that they are doing so with a warrant, with respect for the rights of people involved, but it's targeted for speech that goes over the line. And so this has come up in a number of online speech cases for anonymity, where if you want to reach past someone's public anonymity and find out who is behind it, then you have to show the court that there is actually something unlawful going on here, that this is the best method to get this information. It's not available through other means. And if you can pass these various tests, then the court will allow for that anonymity and privacy to be breached. And then the person who made the speech can be held responsible for it. Now, it may be that in some circumstances that it will be difficult to find that somebody may successfully be better at hiding than the government is better at finding. But we have long had that as a problem in our society. If somebody writes something up, graffiti on the wall, if they did as they did with the Federalist paper and put up broadsheets signed with a pseudonym in the dead of night, there was speech that for which it was difficult to hold someone accountable for, and it can be regrettable, especially when speech is harmful to others. But it has been part of our society for a long time.
Given the free speech implications of financial surveillance, how should the Zcash community think about AML and KYC requirements? And what's reasonable versus unreasonable for governments to require? For example, should protocol layers have any requirements?
So this is a big challenge for financial transactions, is that there are a set of rules for know your customers and to fight against money laundering, which are designed to protect against people misusing the systems or being to transfer money that violates various laws. And I think that a good balance to this is to think about cash. That cash has, these rules are applied to it, but it still has pretty good anonymity properties. And for small transactions, you can get use cash without having to do any additional reporting. And $10,000 is the limit for a number of these kinds of transactions. And a lot of people who are using it for financial transactions where there are deep privacy issues, it's going to be below that level where they could have used cash. And the only major difference is that they're able to do it remotely instead of having to be there in person. And that's like a pretty good balancing point in the sense that a lot of the individuals will be transactions under this level and will have this. And what we're seeing is at least in some of the regulations, an attempt to broaden the scope of where reporting and information has to be provided in a way that it wouldn't have been with a cash-based system. But I think the principal thing is that financial privacy is important, and one of the challenges with any kind of system that requires reporting is it's not an individualized suspicion. And I think a lot of things where the government can have its legitimate interests in trying to prevent illegal activity handled is by going through the process and finding suspicion about particular people.
You said the code is speech. It's frequently said that money is speech. What does that mean where code and money intersect?
So code is speech, as we've discussed, and then money is speech. Well, this is coming up probably in the context of Citizens United, where it was saying that being able to fund, in that case it was a film that was critical of Hillary Clinton, and they were funding it, and the court determined that this was a First Amendment protected activity. And I think one of the issues with Citizens United is that you could come to the right conclusion on that funding an expressive film was expressive activity without going as broadly as the court went in that case. But nevertheless, the decision was saying that spending money in order to support your political cause is also a form of speech, or can be. And this comes up against other transparency rules like donations and creating like public action committees, which have enabled some dark money. So yeah, I think the court does say that it is an expressive activity to spend money in particular ways, and I think that can be in many, many circumstances, like giving money to a political cause, but it is, at least under current law, balanced against some of these transparency rules, especially around elections.
In the upcoming US elections this year and in 2024, should we make free speech online, third party doctrine, and financial privacy into major electoral issues? And if so, how?
That is a good question. I mean, one of the challenges has been that for some of the issues that are near and dear to a lot of people, probably in this community, and certainly to me, that they are part of political equations, but not the deciding factor for a lot of people's voting. That is to say that people, when they make a voting decision, they look at all sorts of issues, and they look at the sum of all of them, and there are a few single issue voters on things like privacy. Nevertheless, I think that what we just talked about in terms of having your voice heard, if you get your voice heard by legislatures with your opinions, then that is something they'll keep in mind. I would also just need to be clear that EFF is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are nonpartisan, and we do not support or oppose any elected candidates. That is part of what being a 501c3 is. So we're not taking any particular position about who you should vote for in order to effectuate what you want to do, but rather be a part of the process and get your voices out there and have it be, hopefully, a consideration that people will have.
What is the role of media in the strong privacy advocacy you've outlined?
Media is super important. It is a way where a message can be spread more widely, that getting things into the news and in a way that will resonate with people who aren't deep in the issue, but they are keeping up with the news. So finding examples of where privacy has been valuable and getting that in the media and trying to understand it. The media, of course, has a lot of pressures on it, sort of one way or another. So just to use an example of how this can be, how things in the media. So one point I was talking to a reporter who was reporting about the emergency exception for obtaining identity information under the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. Is there a provision in there that says if there is an emergency where there is a danger to a person, that you can sort of skip ahead of some of the process and the provider can voluntarily disclose that. And I'm talking about 2 media stories that we're having. One was a story where somebody had disappeared and their family was looking for them and they wanted to get some information. In this case, it wasn't identity information, it was more like location information in order to figure out where they might be. Sort of a story where the company asked them to provide a little bit more information, was looking at it, and they were like, why don't you just hand it over the minute it's there because of this terrible circumstance? There's another story that came out within a couple weeks of that, where people who were malicious were creating fake requests purporting to be from law enforcement to use the same emergency provision in order to get information about exes and others that they were harassing by pretending to be law enforcement, and then it gave over. And this is what I'm talking about is that like it's attention, and the best way to do this is to make sure that the process is done well, so that people can do these sorts of things, reveal the identity, and protect the civil liberties at the same time.
In some jurisdictions, including Australia and the UK, the laws have been introduced that can require developers to insert backdoors into systems. How much of a threat are those laws, and are they something that we should be urgently campaigning against?
Yes, backdoor to encryption. This has been a persistent part of the crypto wars. And the backdoors came into prominence as, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago as a strategy. It was where a lot of governments were saying that, okay, we understand that encryption is valuable. And so we want you to have encryption, but you have to give us a means of accessing the equipment. A lot of people say, well, that really isn't strong encryption. And some of these challenges came about when they said, here's the specific backdoor that we want you to use. And whenever the governments were getting specific about it, then people were finding flaws in it, like the Clipper chip in the 90s, where it was designed to provide a backdoor to communications. And it turned out that backdoor had some technical flaws that Matt Blaze uncovered, and that ended the Clipper chip. So more recently, what they've been doing is just putting into legislative code, you figure it out. Nerd harder to figure out. You just need to give us the plain text. I don't care how you do it. And they put a provision in the law that requires companies to provide the plain text. These are still bad. Strong encryption is vital for protecting and preserving our fundamental rights. The ability to have a private conversation with somebody else is something that is inherently useful for any kind of political opposition or any kind of freedom of thought for being able to have these conversations. So we should definitely be pushing back against any laws that try to require a backdoor, even if we think that those backdoors could be done well, which we don't.
Okay. Well, in the interest of finishing on time, we'll finish it there. But Kurt will be joining us in 10 minutes for a panel talking about the state of privacy regulation, along with Paul Brigner from the Electric Coin Company and Peter van Valkenburg from Coin Center and the Zcash Foundation's Board of Directors. So, Kurt, thank you very, very much. And please join me in thanking Kurt for speaking with us today.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.